Good evening, everybody. My name is Marilyn O'Connell, and I'm president of the board of the Vilna Shul Boston Center for Jewish Culture. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're really excited to have you for the second in a three-part series. And I just wanted to say 1 second, I know everybody's very anxious to get to the program. The Vilna was built 100 years ago. And when it was first built, Jews gathered to discuss and debate important issues of the day. And we're still doing that 100 years later. Not only are we Boston Center for Jewish Culture, but we're committed to being a center of engagement for everyone. And so we are thankful and happy that you're participating in our program this evening. We will have a short Q&A at the end of the discussion. So if you have any questions, you can type your questions in there. And I would like to welcome Johnny Charles, Jenny Gaffrar, Laura Holmes, and Nia Evans, and our moderator, Andy Tarsy. I'm just going to try and shorten his wonderful bio. Andy leads Emblem Strategic LLC.
Shorten it a lot.
A strategic advisory firm, okay, that helps organizations gain advantage by aligning their vision with their values. Among Andy's numerous awards, his leadership in the Anti-Defamation League earned him a spot on the Forward 50 list of the most influential Jewish professionals in the US, and my personal favorite, the Kivi Kaplan Award given to him by the NAACP. Is that fast enough, Andy? Now I'd like to turn it over, enjoy the program, and also we want to thank all our sponsors. You can check our website, but we appreciate all our sponsors, and we are happy to be a leader in these conversations. So enjoy, and Andy, take it away.
Thank you so much, Marilyn, and thank you, Vilna Shul. I want to give just special praise and thanks to the staff of the Vilna Shul and the volunteers and the board members for muscling through this very strange time. There's a heaviness and a sadness and a real awareness of the fragility of everything, and yet places that gather people up to learn and strengthen community and connect to culture, they don't stop. They keep going and they keep innovating. And look at you guys, it's been awesome to gather and to be a participant in these programs. So we're going to meet some interesting new friends tonight and build on what we started learning last week together. Couple quick thoughts before we get into it. This is not entertainment. This is education. It's engagement, but it's okay if it's kind of fun. And if anybody has a good story they want to tell tonight that'll just relax us and get us to understand, then that's great, because it's not homework. This is about bettering ourselves and bettering our world, but it's about growing and learning and thinking and hopefully laughing too. We talked at the outset of the series, which was last week, about why we were gathering, and it's a very specific focus. It's on being better allies in the work of anti-racism and an economic empowerment. And I want to focus for a moment on what we mean by some of those terms. Get this out of the way real quick. Allies are people who help, people who show up and who are of use and who have a shared sense of the reason that the work needs to be done and who have a stake in the outcome. It doesn't mean we're not also the people who are facing trouble and who need allies. We can be allies all the way around the circle and in a million ways that cross through it. We can bring everything we have to help others while we're in the middle of being helped by somebody else. So this isn't about saving anybody or riding in on a horse or finding the exact perfect thing that's going to fix it all and make it all make sense. It's just about being true to ourselves, being who we are. But what we're trying to focus on, and if you're taking notes, organize it maybe this way, is we're looking to hone in on what are the knowledge, the skills, and the attitudes that we need to be of use, to be champions, to be allies, to be partners. There are a lot of different words for this work, but we really at the core are saying we want to be of use. I will put it to you from my perspective. I've done a lot of work in different parts of this conversation. And my personal belief is that showing up when there is someone who feels marginalized is very important, and it will always be. But the work of the day is dismantling structures, dismantling systems that are about that are creating winners and losers in a way that is not natural, that is not the result or the inevitable outcome of the way things are. There are systems built by certain people with power that don't work for everyone in our society. And in fact, you could argue looking out the window these days that they're not really working for anybody. But let's face it, they're working pretty well for some, and they are really not working for others. So this isn't just about the casual sort of interrupt uh, a course event or an ugly moment. This is about what kind of a world do we want to build, and what is it going to take for us to get about the business of building it. So I'm going to bring some guests forward. If everybody on our panel can light up your camera at this point and join us and take yourself off mute. And we're going to get right into some conversation. It's great. There's chat already coming in. There are questions coming in. We're catching them all and we're synthesizing, and we're going to get your voices into this conversation. But what I really wanted to say at the outset is we're talking about a structural wealth gap in this city and in this country that is connected to policy and history and intentional actions. And we're talking about responses tonight that sort of, if you're a poker player, it's like, I see you, philanthropy and volunteerism, and I raise you. So part of the question for the Boston Ujima Project, and we've got the team on tonight, because when you ask their executive director, Nia Evans, to come on, she says, only if I can bring my team, and we get to learn from the practitioners. But the question I have for you guys is, how do you define the problem that we're responding to in your own way? You know, don't read us the brochure. We can look at the website. What is the sort of status quo that needs to be done to just sort of move things along? And then what's the raise? What's the new thing you're doing? And how do we get to be a part of it? So that's the preview. But I have a harder question first, as I want to bring you in and I'll introduce you a little bit. But first, my partner in this crime and others, I hope, Nia Evans. For those of you who met Nia last week, you already know that she is the executive director of the Boston Ujima Project and former executive director of our NAACP Boston branch. But she's been studying and working in public policy for a while in a lot of different roles around the country, and involved in everything that touches it, from art to justice campaigns to citizen engagement to advocacy. She's got degrees from Columbia and Cornell, and probably some other ones in there somewhere, where she's just looking at policy from every direction she can, and has a human touch that is just to be in Nia's presence, to be in her world, and to just have her look at you and say, you ready to get to work? So here we are. Nia, welcome and thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you very much.
So I asked you a question when we met last time about your work and what you wanted to do, but I didn't get to ask you a question that I asked the other panelists. And Jenny and Johnny, this is coming to you right away. So get ready. Why do you do this? Take us back in the life of Nia Evans. What happened that you couldn't think of anything else to do with yourself than all of this? What's the formative story? What's the place you take it, you trace it to in family? So much of the Vilna Shul is about the immigrant story and arriving here and making sense of life in America. What's yours?
Sure. Thank you, Andy. So I think part of what's mine is I received excellent education from my family, from my parents, and from my elementary school, which was an all-Black private elementary school in Inglewood, California. I just remember there, for example, learning about Thurgood Marshall, and Thurgood Marshall being one of my immediate heroes, and pretty early on saying I would grow up to be a civil rights attorney. And I forwent, I didn't choose law school, and that's another journey. But I did land in civil rights. But I think what was really important about the education that I received from my parents who were immigrants to this country. I am first generation American, and from the all Black elementary school that I went to. And I think we'll get into this in the conversation later, is I would say a valuing of ourselves and our family and our communities in a country that traditionally did not value us. And that was powerful. So I think for me, having that experience that I later learned in college and as an adult was actually rare for a lot of Black people in America. Drove me, I would say, to make that experience less rare. And I'll pause there.
I like that. Johnny, Charles, I'm going to introduce you really quick on the way into asking you the same question so you can think while I'm doing this. But I want everybody to say hello to Johnny. Johnny Charles is the managing director of the Ujima Fund, and I learned about the fund pretty shortly after I first heard about Ujima. Where's Laura? Is Laura on my screen still? And I just don't have her. I don't have Laura. There she is. Okay, Laura, Laura is coming up in a minute. But the Ujima Fund is an investment vehicle, an investment fund that is within the Boston Ujima Project. So we're going to get into what that is in a second, more in detail. But Johnny is both a graduate of Curry College and also the Heller School for Social Policy and Management at Brandeis, and among many other positions in financial management and social change in the community development world. He's really emerged as a critical voice on financial justice, on the equity issues that have to do with who has money, how do they get it, what do you do with it to preserve it, to grow it, and get power and get doors open. At this point, as the fund's managing director, and we'll talk in a bit about, can I invest in the fund? How does the fund work? What does the fund do? Laura's going to talk about being the company that Laura leads as a recipient of funds, as an entrepreneur. But this is how Johnny's role is described. He dares community stakeholders, investors, and business owners to dream, and describes the fund as the nation's first democratic investment fund with a focus of returning wealth to the working class, Black, Indigenous, and other communities of color in Boston and keeping it there. All right, Johnny. So what's your answer? Why this? With those skills, we should be visiting you at your office at State Street asking for a donation. And instead you're out there with your sleeves rolled up.
Trust me, I wouldn't fit in even if I tried. And we could talk about what fitting in actually means. But thank you for having me. And so I just want to start really quickly, just honor those before me, particularly. So whenever I get an opportunity to speak, I never want it to come off as like this found knowledge is generally just mine alone. This comes from family, this comes from Nia, this comes from Jenny, our staff, and other people who've played a role in my role here and before me. Why do I do this? So I'm first generation Haitian American. For me, it is a lot of different reasons, but for me, it's really a couple of different moments. And I think one, which is critical for me, is so I think my parents being immigrants to this country, there's this feeling of lack of power. And there's also this feeling of wanting and oftentimes having to assimilate into the culture. And I think the lack of power is one of the big ones, in the sense of like, I shouldn't say this and I shouldn't say that. And oftentimes, whether, police cruisers driving by, there's always this sense of like, we need to fix ourselves, and not being able to really kind of take space, own space, and claiming space as yours it ought to be. And I think particularly the rich history of Haiti itself, and understanding that, it was the first Black republic, particularly in this Western Hemisphere, and the rich nation that it once was. I think for me, I just come from a long line of just pride and freedom at the center of it. And so outside of making my family proud, it's also just representing where I'm from, who I am. And then I think lastly, it's also, staff is used to hearing me talk about this all the time. My child who is 9 years old, and part of me coming over to Ujima, was some critical questions that my son would ask about the work that I do. And I got to a point where I realized, oh, I don't think I'm a part of the solution. And I just wanted to be part of that solution. And I could talk a little bit more about that later. But yeah, I think we'll start there. Thanks again.
That's good stuff. Okay, I'm coming to you, Jenny, and then Laura, you're going to back clean up, and then we'll get into the hard issues, okay? But Jenny, first of all, I want to help. I want to get help that I should have got before with pronouncing your last name correctly.
Marilyn asked me the same question. So there's two ways. If you want to be French and say it properly, it's je frère. If you want to honor being an American, you can say it as the evil villain in Aladdin, Jafar.
Awesome. I had a Lithuanian-born grandmother who, when I started studying French in 7th grade, stopped speaking to me in English for a while and insisted that I speak with her in French. But so the Lithuanian is just the connection to this institution with the Vilna. But much to her chagrin, it didn't take. So I'm gonna go with Jenny. Anyway, Jenny's an entrepreneur more than once. She's a credit specialist and a money coach, but she's also a daring visionary and is not seeking the easy path with applying those skills. She has her bachelor's degree from Curry College in community health and wellness. She's trained through the National Financial Educators Council, the Credit Consultants Association. Her mission, as she's shared with the world, but we're going to get to under the fingernails of it a little bit tonight, is to help those who feel marginalized or forgotten by the financial industry to be seen and treated with dignity. So, oh boy, does America need you healthy and safe. Okay, why?
So I knew Johnny was going to take a little bit of my answer. I am actually an immigrant from Haiti. I was born there. I came here when I was 8 years old. And part of my big why is that part of my identity. I grew up surrounded by people who look like me, people who doctors that looked like me, teachers that looked like me, lawyers, engineer. And the first time that I realized that I was Black and that may have been an issue was when I came to America. And I thought that is something that is important to talk about, to learn about, to understand, because I believe that this conversation is important because racism impacts identity. Racism impacts your life. It's disrupting. So to have that conversation is important. And the second reason why I love this work and I am part of this work, I believe in the vision of this work, is my faith. I believe that God is for all people. And for me to be part of any organization, I have to believe that that organization is for all people. And when you meet Nia Evans, you're flabbergasted, first of all, that this person is just very relaxed, very down to earth. And then she blows your mind with the amazingness that is her. So I was bought in all the way for Boston Ujima, and I am here excited for this conversation. Thank you, Andy.
Fantastic. And making it all the way around the horn, Laura Holmes. I first heard Laura Holmes speak at the first Ujima Project event I went to, which was a glorified house party on Martin Luther King Monday a few years ago, where there were different rooms and you went to each room and they just blew you away with data or some sort of like bottoms up, understanding of what the problem was. And then there was this whole presentation that Laura did about Zero. So Laura, The top thing on her resume is that she used to be a city school bus driver in Boston. And I think we all find that charming in some way because it's just so wholesome and so essential in the lives, you know, of a neighborhood. I mean, it's like we don't treat them like that, but we sort of romanticize it, right, that way. But Laura has built organizations and initiatives in every aspect of equity, from domestic violence to foreclosure, the foreclosure crisis, to starting all sorts of micro enterprises that get at this question of building wealth and building economic power and enterprises. And presently, and for a bit now, she's been the general manager and the leader of business development for Ciro Cooperative. So working class African-American and Latino entrepreneurs in Roxbury and Dorchester founded this company to create living wages and great jobs and great opportunity for the ownership, employee-owned, diverse team. And they raised capital from the community. They grounded it in values in every way you can think of, and many that you haven't yet. But it's also a working business with customers that complain when it's not done right. Is that correct? So it's not like everybody's out there just saying, oh, it's okay, you care about humans. This is actually business. And so we're going to get into what kind of business. But Laura, what's the story? What's the seed for your journey and that made you so committed to this path?
Hi, thanks, Andy and everybody. It's nice to be here. I'm going to speak from a way that I totally did not prepare to speak from, because
Good.
the easiest thing in the world for me to do is to talk about Ciro Cooperative. But given where we are right now, and Jenny and Johnny and Nia leading me in this way, I'm going to share a little of my personal journey to wanting to be part of the solution, as Johnny says, which I think is probably the thickest thread running throughout my life. And that's because of, it also has roots in, for me, a faith-based community, which I might as well describe as liberation theology. Although I don't think that the Congregationalists who raised me would have called it that. They would have I'll date myself proudly and say, growing up in the 60s and 70s, I was absorbing the civil rights movement. I was absorbing the anti-war movement. I had brothers, significant, draftable years older than me. So these political issues shaped me as a child. And the context I grew up in my United Church of Christ growing up, was one that says you serve, was one that says you stand up, was one that says Jesus gives us the example that's based on justice. And I sometimes tell my story by saying, I think I took that more seriously than my community intended me to. It turned me into what I hope is a race traitor. It turned me into somebody who does take seriously, where are the roots of white supremacy? Where's my role in that? And what can I do to try and change it up? And I think that I've been trying to figure that out, continue to try and figure that out for a long, long time. And so when you talk about the charm of being a Boston school bus driver, I would like to tell you, for those of you who are from Boston or have been around here for 30 or more years, you'll understand this. Choosing to become a Boston school bus driver was choosing to come onto the front lines with people of color in Boston in the 1970s and 80s. It was the first place where I, as a white, queer, middle-class school bus driver, was able to be an ally, sitting in that bus with kids of color from every neighborhood across the city. And for me, that was my college. That was my college education. I got to understand every neighborhood, and I got to sit there in the same vehicle when the white folks in South Boston were throwing rocks at us as we were just trying to deliver kids to school. It was a tremendous education for me. as I've evolved, I have come to, at this point in time, I really like to think of myself as an accomplice, and where possible, a co-conspirator.
So
Rather
taking
than just-
ally up, it's I see you ally and I raise you accomplice.
Well, you know, allies can be important too,
Okay.
but it's not as relational as far as I'm concerned. I mean, to me, as an accomplice, I take leadership from Black women. I mean, I take leadership from people of color, but at the, you know, the people who are defining this movement in a way that I think it's all about right now is Black women in leadership. I was hired at Cerro Cooperative. I was the first hire by the founders of color who brought together Cerro Cooperative. And
You know what? I
think
didn't even say what it does, and we're going to come back to this, but just so we don't leave people hanging, tell us what it does.
Well, Cerro Cooperative is a commercial composting services provider. So basically what we do is we help any business, small business, restaurant, grocery store, large institution, reduce their waste, protect the environment by separating out their compostable material. And we provide the services to set up those programs and to retrieve those organic resources, to turn them into soil and pollution reduction elements, and support a local urban farming economy in the city of Boston.
I'm going to stop you right there because we're going to come back to that. You are here today as sort of the lab animal as we go with Johnny and Jenny into the theory of how do we get people engaged in raising the money? How do we apply services and get people involved in supporting the business operator? But you're here to be the operator and sort of the endpoint of all of this work. So thank you for being that in our play tonight. But also, by the way, what's the website? Just as we shout out all these things, let's put the names out there so people can go do their research. Maybe they should be getting you guys in to talk about their compost needs.
www.cero.coop, CERO.COOP.
And give me like 2 or 3 clients that we know that you guys work for.
Wegmans grocery stores, Northeastern University,
I heard
Spalding Hospital,
Yeah, I heard of those.
the
Okay.
Daily Table.
Love it. Coming soon to Central Square, by the way, Daily Table. We're really excited about that.
With Cero Co-op composting.
Awesome. All right. So here's the thing, Nia. Start us off with this, and then we're going to go to your lieutenants to talk about their components of the puzzle. So what is the mission of the Boston Ujima project? We're going to, just to remind everybody of the framing here, we're working towards a toolkit for us over tonight and next week. So we all come out of this season with some new tricks and we get involved for 2021. So we're going to look at this model today, the Boston Ujima project. We're going to look through Johnny's eyes at the investment fund, through Jenny's eyes at the way she's galvanizing a whole wraparound for entrepreneurs to support their success, which is you don't have to be an MBA to be on Jenny's team. Am I correct? Okay, thank you. So we put that out of the way. There's awesome programs for the MBAs. Love you, love you, love you. Anyone can get on Jenny's team to steal the thunder from the end, but you got to have certain knowledge and some skills and an attitude. So we're going to start getting there. People are already saying, how do we invest? Johnny's got you. Don't worry about it. But what we're going to do is talk through these different models that they have, because they're not, they're actually at substance behind what they really do. They are actually dramatic. You can use words like radical if you want, but why they're dramatic is because they're not just striving harder in the system. They're trying to change models into new models. Okay, Nia, with that build up, what is the Boston Ujima project? Where did it come from? What's the mission? What's the life of it? Give us a tour.
Sure. So first, Ujima is Swahili for cooperative work and responsibility. And I like to start there because every word of that phrase is an apt and important descriptor of Ujima. So if we just start with the cooperative piece, and again, I'm sure we'll get into this later on in the night, we are intentionally a multi-stakeholder project or multi-stakeholder initiative. And so what that means is we enroll every member of our community, understanding that we're multidimensional. As human beings, we're multidimensional. And so we enroll every single actor in our community to come together to pool our resources. And our resources can be financial resources, social resources, our expertise, our time, our energy. And we come together to do a few things. So one is to do some planning and development in our own communities. And that's to first determine our needs, prioritize our needs. And then next is to then take the resources that we've put together to resource those needs after we've done that prioritization. And then to learn from that experience and to do it over again. So how do we come about? There are two origin stories, and I won't tell the whole story. I won't tell the whole of each story because they are pretty long. One involves Cerro, which is why Laura is here. And then the other involves our grassroots peers. But to try to really just shorten things, Cerro, one of the ways that Cerro came about was essentially solving the problem of small business ownership by people of color. And when I say solving the problem of small business ownership by people of color, what I really mean by that is access to traditional capital and access to other kinds of capital. Aaron Tanaka, who you know, Andy, and I'm not sure if there are people amongst our participants who know Aaron Tanaka as well, who I credit with Ujima. Ujima is his brainchild. During the process of helping Cerro get off the ground, which really involved putting together different types of money to finance themselves. And you talked about that already. So you've talked about the money that they've raised from community members. Cerro also received some philanthropic funding. They also received a loan from BII. So for people who were here with us last week, BII was also involved in the formation of Cerro. We have the sweat equity of the workers who own Cerro. And Aaron was instrumental in helping to put all of those pieces together. He was coming out of his prior experience as the executive director of Boston Workers Alliance, which was a grassroots organization that was working to reintegrate people returning home from incarceration. And he was at BII at the time. And so he was BII's first kind of managing director of their fund. And that experience actually got him wondering, why doesn't this happen more often? So that's also, again, the cooperative piece, really speaking to the multi-stakeholder nature of our work, thinking about all of the different types of people that we bring together and really just pooling our strengths. And his question was, why doesn't the finance sector and the organizing sector work together more often? And so one of the things we say about Ujima is the process of replicating or creating as many Cerros as possible with the process that we used to help create Cerro. And again, I was bringing together different types of stakeholders, different types of resources to provide financing for a business that couldn't get it otherwise. And what I mean by that, I couldn't get it from traditional financing. And I'll let Laura tell more of that story if it's appropriate. The second piece is actually really similar, the second story. The second story, as I said, involves our grassroots peers, anyone amongst our participants who volunteer, who've run an organization, who are members of grassroots organization, know that a big part of our energy goes to funding our activities. And unfortunately, it's a disproportionate amount of time. And so our peers, again, BII was amongst them, City Life Vida Urbana, Boston's premier housing justice organization, and about 30 to 40 other organizations wanted to explore what it would look like for us to sustainably finance ourselves. So I talked about, we spent a lot of time trying to fund
That's
our
a huge statement.
That's a huge
I just
statement.
I just want to plant a flag on that one because
Yeah.
a lot of people like me who don't know, how do I help? I mean, I guess, do I make a donation? And the answer isn't no, believe me. We
Right.
need donations for anything decent in the world, and this is no exception. But that wasn't going to be the way you fed empowerment by starting out with a handout. It was going to have to be something more structural.
Exactly. And I appreciate you bringing that out, Andy. And the reason why that was important, the reason why this question was important is, as I said, a lot of time and energy goes to funding our work, and generally that's philanthropic funding. And if you have an excellent philanthropic partner, that's wonderful. So philanthropy is one of the stakeholders that I talk about that we bring together in this initiative, that we work with, that we partner with closely. If it is more along the lines of traditional philanthropy, and I should say philanthropy, just as every other kind of sector and industry today, is changing. So they are having conversations about how they need to meet this moment, be better in this moment. And they're not necessarily new conversations. And much like a lot of other conversations we're a part of, we've seen just a lot of progress, of course, in this year. So I should mention that. But just to say, if you're an organization that has had more of a conventional or traditional relationship with philanthropy, there are moments where that relationship can feel more burdensome than supportive. And so this is what was at the root of that question, in terms of how do we sustainably finance ourselves, and why is this important? Laura talked about following the lead of Black women. There's, again, when we kind of think about our relationship to philanthropy, there's this question of who's leading, who's driving our conversations, who's determining the direction of our work. How does the ability to provide funding or finance, how does that provide a power imbalance? And so the idea was to really address that power imbalance and to really make sure it's not negatively impacting our work.
Take me to the sword point of the organization. What does it actually do? And how did you, at least so far, flying the plane and building it at the same time?
Yep. And
then a storm even worse than the status quo, which was not pretty, is here. How did you actually execute on that goal? So again, like, what does it actually do? Like, what are the programs? And then how did you make it economically built around the idea of being self-sustaining at the outset, or going forward?
Absolutely. So what does it actually do? So as I mentioned before, it's an ecosystem. And what I mean by that is it isn't just one thing. We spent a year leading up to Ujima studying what it would take to start a public bank. In that course of study, we studied a bunch of different financial institutions, products, structures, processes. And then we said, one thing's not enough. We are looking at poverty. You've talked about the structural racial wealth gap that we're looking at. We're looking at all of the other issues that our orgs deal with. These are systemic issues. A singular solution is not going to adequately address that. And so what we want to try is a systemic solution. And so that's why we came up with the ecosystem approach, which is trying a few of the things that we think that center communities of color the way communities of color should be centered, and that we think are impactful in their own right, but could be more impactful interconnected.
So give me a list of that. Yep. That is language that makes sense to a lot of people. Everybody's met a consultant that says pick one thing. Every one of us is a part of something that is more meta because it has to be, and there's both.
Right, exactly. Both. And so here are the things.
You got some of your individual projects. So hit them, what they are.
So here's the ecosystem. Smack dab in the center is our membership body. People. And I think we heard again, if you were with us last week, I believe Tally brought that out. So that became a theme, just really the importance of people. And so that's the center of our ecosystem. The second thing you've mentioned,
just going right at that, people can become a member,
People can
or
become members.
or a solidarity member if you
Yep.
feel as I did, like I want to be really close to this, but I don't see myself in the and by the way, let's push and play on this topic because maybe I'm right and maybe I'm not. But I sort of said, I don't think this is about me. So I don't want to be a member, but I don't want to be not a member. Is that a
Mhm.
thing? And the answer, of course, was yes. We have
Yep,
solidarity. But
absolutely.
okay, so we'll get at that. So there's this
We'll get
body
at that.
of
Yep.
different
So
relations.
exactly. So we'll get at that. So at the center are members, are people. Then we have the Ujima Fund, which you'll hear more about from Johnny. The Ujima Fund, as you stated, Andy, is considered the nation's first democratically governed investment fund. And what that means is our people, our members, vote directly on what we invest in from the fund. There are no intermediaries. We have an investment committee, and again, Johnny can probably get into that process later. They do not determine what we invest in. It is our people that determine that. And we have processes. So this is another piece of the ecosystem. Our assembly process, we do neighborhood assemblies and citywide assemblies. And at those assemblies are where our people tell us which businesses they love. That's a framing that we use right now. Which businesses they think we need in our communities and which businesses they would like to replace. And those are marching orders for us. We don't add to the list ourselves in some other process. We don't remove from the list ourselves in some other process. We don't gather the information and then put it somewhere else and then do whatever we think is better because we've called it community engagement or community gathering or something, but really we're going to make the real decisions. We don't do that. We have a list right now of 140 businesses that have come through that process. We have some additional lists that will get voted on next year. And again, those lists are given to us directly by community members.
Okay, so we've got the members and we've got an investment fund. We've got another program that has to do with businesses.
Mm-hmm. Yep, we have a business alliance. And so in the investment fund, we of course provide, through the investment fund, we provide capital for business. We also invest in real estate. We also invest in community initiatives. That is not the only support that we provide for what we invest in. So our business alliance, Jenny will talk about that some more, provides, amongst other things, peer support for our investees. We have a technical assistance network, and I'll leave it to Jenny to talk about that. And we also have plans to develop a worker services network.
So that's a dose of it. There's a lot of other things in the ecosystem, but because we're going to focus on the investment piece and the business alliance piece, I'm going to dive in on that. And by the way, the night I met Nia Evans, which was Friday night at Temple Israel, was we were listening to our friend Shigoniru speak. And one of the things he said, you were sitting in the front row, actually, is that right? Mm-hmm. And he didn't even tell me who I was meeting when I met you. It was just, here's Nia, and then it became Nia. But he said he said very bravely, I thought, in an audience that was predominantly white, although our congregation and the Jewish community is definitely not entirely any one culture or background or color, but point was well taken. And he said, you need to learn how to be better followers. And I thought that was really gutsy because everybody knows that you're supposed to be a leader. And then you sort of are like, okay, what should I lead? And he was saying, yeah. That's a thing. There's an alchemy to saying that, but it doesn't mean you're in charge. It doesn't mean go start something. Being a leader in this instance might mean leading your community to follow someone and to get involved in something. So in that spirit, that temple that I belong to became an investor in the fund. And there's plenty of room, I understand, to become an investor in the fund again. So tell us about the fund, Johnny. What is it? Everybody's partially thinking like, I wonder if I want to be an investor in it. But before it becomes quite like that, what is the give us like the back of the baseball card. Tell us about what is it? What's the deal? And who's involved and who's helping, and what do you need to be successful from folks that might find it interesting?
So thank you. And considering the fact that I am about what, 6 months in, there's probably limits on certain things that I can speak to. So I want to be clear in terms of following. I am having a great time, and usually that's not the case, right? I think for me, and I talk to Nia about this all the time, as a cisgender, headstrong African-American man who have lived in urban settings, particularly in Boston, I think for me, oftentimes following is hard to conceptualize. And so I'm always like ready to lead. I've always been kind of like in management positions, and got to Ujima and was like, sold. Nia, I am following you. Lead me. I am with you on this. Now she'll say we co-create, and which we do, but I am definitely serving and following in that sense. And so I think the main important particular groups that I am following, particularly where I sit as managing director, are the working class communities here in Boston, who have invested in the fund among others. And considering your congregation have invested, so you're among the 282 investors so far. And so we're a $5 million fund. That is the goal. We are at 3.1 million and believe and aiming to get to 5 million by the end of the year, next year, 2021. Our particular fund is broken up into notes. So we've got Nia Note, Umoja, Kujichagulia, and Imani. And the way that, at least I've heard Nia frame it in a lot of different ways, there's a reparation frame to our notes in general. And particularly what that means is making sure that we're not necessarily doing this the traditional mode or the traditional model, which is those who invest more are the ones that are collecting the most return. The returns in particular, the working class individuals who are investing that $50, who are investing the $100 that they actually have, who are also doing the work by participating in the changes that we're looking to make, are also earning those strong returns too when we talk about the 3% raises. And so particularly the fund itself is an engine for a lot of different economic activity and a lot of different participation activity in Ujima itself. And
Wait,
so in terms of,
full stop for a second. I
Yep.
can be an investor for how much money? What's the minimum?
About $50 if we're talking about Kujichagulia. And I feel like I'm a young person looking back at my parent. Is that a correct, Mom? So I'm looking at Nia kind of like double checking. And yeah, so as minimum is $50.
Okay, and then but others are or institutions are able to come in with all kinds of levels of money, but with the understanding that you're not allocating votes on what to invest in.
Correct.
Proportionally, so that somebody put the $1 million in and the rest of us put in our $150 or $500, and it's really about them.
Correct. And it's really about the understanding that the investment in equity is being redefined, right? The investment in equity are in some ways have already been contributed in a lot of ways, particularly from the working class individuals who live in a community, who are also centered around what those solutions would look like and how they would be delivered. And so when we talk about the assemblies and really creating the needs and nominating small businesses, we're particularly getting that from those who are in those communities, not those who are looking to gain a return as solidarity members or those who are outside of the work. Understanding that the work and investment in equity are measured in so many different ways, and particularly with the individuals who live in those communities that you're investing in, they are at the end result, particularly what that investment looks like. And
okay,
so
quick question.
Yep.
We talked about Cero and what Lord does, but how did they end up becoming? I know that they were sort of the original, patient zero, but maybe even mention a couple other names of some companies. How do they end up being candidates for investment from you guys? And what do they have to do? Because it's not that easy to get your money. You have to show that you've got a commitment to a set of values, right?
Correct. I can speak to the values piece. I will let Nia speak to where Cyril is, and then I can talk about what it looks like for businesses moving forward and what all that looks like.
Okay, and there's also a question already coming in about, well, what do investors get then? What would a corporate investor get, that said, we agree the world isn't fair and that this is a really interesting model. What do I get back? Am I getting a financial return? Why would I choose to do this with some money?
Yep.
Keep going, and I'm going to cut you off when I have to because we're going to run out of time and I got to get some other pieces in, but keep going.
That's more than okay. So in terms of the returns, there are financial returns, particularly that are specific to the notes and what those rates actually are. So there are 3-year returns, and there are annual returns, but it's all specified underneath a particular note. And so we have an offering memorandum. For some folks, you probably understand this as like a prospectus. They have all different names, but it particularly articulates what the risk is that you're investing in and some of the outlines as it relates to the fund. And as we advise for everyone, you want to consult with your financial advisor before you invest in the fund and really kind of reviewing what the memorandum is, so you have a broad understanding of what the investment actually is. So let me hand it off to Nia, particularly to speak to Cyril, and then I'll do like a blanket in terms of all other businesses.
All right, and then we're running over you, Jenny, about.
And remind me, what's the Cyril question?
Let's save Seto for when we get back to Laura in a minute.
All right, excellent.
But I think the big question, Johnny, was that I wanted to get at before we kick it over to Jenny is, do you have volunteers helping you? You have check writers, you have, what does the beehive around you look like if I'm participating here tonight and thinking in 2021, I'm going to do some new things in the community and I want to know if maybe this is a fit.
Yeah, there's a whole lot, and forgive me if I miss some folks and particular groups. We have an internal fund management team that can, and some of that is here with Nia and Jenny. There are those who are volunteering their time externally who serve on our investment committee. Jenny will speak to the Business Alliance folks. There are community standards committee, those who are also volunteering their times as well to kind of support the Business Alliance work. We have our lawyer group who are also volunteering as well. And in terms of producing documents, term sheets, closing documents, time, due diligence checklist, the whole 9 yards. And so it's a broader village that's a part of this that's really kind of supporting the work, and even more folks even before then, because keep in mind that we had founding business members who were also supporting the formation of Ujima as well.
Okay, so here's my question then. So if I'm thinking I like it, it sounds interesting, but it's intimidating. I don't know if I have what you need. I talk about knowledge, skills, and attitudes. I think we all need some knowledge about our history and how we got here. Mm-hmm. I think everybody on this call knows that, whether we have that knowledge or not. Skills, it sounds like you have a range of needs. Some of them are pretty technical, like a law degree, but some of them may be a little more eclectic than that. And talk to me a little bit about the skills and the attitude, mostly. Lean in on attitude, like people show up to help. Are they, what do they need to know? What do we need to carry in the room with us so that we're what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Johnny, can I cut you off for a second? Because I have an attitude that's important. Okay. So one key attitude that everyone who volunteer needs is one of a listener, like an active listener, someone who's willing to listen and sit with that, with whatever is shared with you and not come in as a savior. I think a lot of times when we have allies or people who say they want to support this work, one of the default is to come in as if, okay, I have the answer to your problems, I'm going to fix everything. And the reality of it is that's not going to be helpful. I find that the attitude that gets the most work done in our community is one where you come in with the mindset that you are part of a ecosystem, that you are participating in something, like you're a cell in a body, right? You're
Nice.
not the
Love
body.
All right, let me stop you for a second. We're coming right back to you, but Johnny, finish up on, we just got attitude. You trust me, you can add to anything you want. I'm not trying to direct you. I just want to hear. But what do we need? What skills do I need to have to know if I could be helpful to you? What do I bring?
Yeah. So if we're talking about investment committee, I mean, knowledge of business finance is always welcome. I think particularly for us, it's also, you know, if you know somewhat of the solidarity economy itself, if you know some grounding of what it means to practice emancipatory practices in terms of liberation work, and your heart is really kind of centered around small business development, because it's not an easy conversation to have oftentimes, because as it was shared earlier, we're also balancing organizing and investment and finance, and sometimes they're not synonymous with each other. Ujima is like making that work and proving that concept wrong in the ways that we do it, because we're oftentimes, because there's two elements, to be honest with you, there's two elements that you have to put first, right? There is the workers and there's the community. And oftentimes in the way that we practice capitalism, the way that we practice business, they're worlds apart. And the one thing, I think the one notion oftentimes of capitalism, I need to get paid, I need to get that dollar. And so what does it mean if the dollar was, if the dollar was kind of outside? So if we're talking about it in an inverted curve here, the dollar's in the outside, and we're really tangling with the distance between community and workers, and really making sure that we shorten that distance between the two. And so oftentimes it's really, can you comprehend that? Can we have that conversation? And then we often use the term self-organizing in a lot of the work we do with our members. And so there is a lot of that that's required with individuals, whether it's inside or out there.
I hate my job. I'm going to stop you right there.
Yep.
You use a lot of big words. Nia's helping us by putting them in the chat because there's books I need to read. Let's get some, we're also, by the way, we're building a resource list. So we are landing by next week's session. We will be organizing around a toolkit of what people can really hone in on to show up and be of use. So everyone that's here tonight, this conversation continues next week, and Nia and I will be putting that together in a way that we land in a very user-friendly place with all of this stuff. But there's some vocabulary and some concepts there. We'll be putting all that in a resource list. So thank you for that, Johnny. You also we could give you an hour and we wouldn't have enough. So that's a taste. Jenny, what's the Business Alliance? And how do people get involved in helping in that? Do I have it right that it doesn't necessarily have to be that I used to have my own business and now I can help you with yours?
Thank you for asking, Andy. So our Good Business Alliance, the mission of our Good Business Alliance is to really empower Boston's entrepreneurs of color, our businesses of color. So this organization, this group is the tail end after a process. So our process starts off first, usually within our assemblies, our neighborhood and city assemblies, where a business that we love is named. Once a business is named by the community, they are presented in front of our communities. Community. I can't say it right now. Our
Community
CSC.
Standards Committee.
Thank you. Community Standards Committee. And there, our committee, which as Johnny shared, is filled with people who are volunteering their time, take them through the intake process, our community intake process. Now, the basis of our intake process is the community voted on 36 good business standards. These standards are what the community said. I'm going to say the word community several times.
Go ahead.
It's what these 36 standards are the standards that the people in your neighborhoods, in our neighborhood, said that they want each businesses that we invest in should on minimum keep. So these 36 standards can also be found on our website, and we can share that information so that it can be part of the greater resource. But I have it pulled up here just to share a little bit of what it involves, from anything from women workforce. At least 33% of employees identify as women. There is quarry-friendly policies. There are fair scheduling. So these are 36 standards that were voted on by members of the community. And once
Can
the
everybody see
community,
it in the chat? Nia's sharing it in the chat. This is like we're operating on multi-modes. Real quick before you go on, Jenny, Lynn, how do people make sure they're gonna capture what's in the chat? I know we're gonna do the resource guide and get it back, but if people want stuff that's getting posted in the chat, what should they be doing right now?
I will be emailing everyone the relevant information from the chat tomorrow. So as long as you're registered, you will get a link to the recording to share with friends and all of the chat information.
All right, you're the best. Okay, keep going, Jenny. You're on a roll. So these are not like you downloaded it from like the Chamber of Commerce. This is bottoms up from your membership, from neighborhoods, from people who are saying, you know what I think businesses really need to have front of mind and prove it is this or this or this or this.
exactly.
Can I just break in really quickly, say, Andy, because this comes up sometimes where we're doing the round on the standards. This also came from business owners. So I think just to kind of underscore Johnny's point in terms of the distance between workers and communities, communities and businesses, and workers and businesses sometimes, we also really like to emphasize, we have business owners like Laura and fellow worker owners, et cetera, who want to do business better. So this notion that, for example, that businesses have to exploit people to do well, to make a profit, to earn revenue, we are challenging that very directly by very intentionally investing in businesses who deliberately do business much differently than we understand it.
And you're not forcing anybody to change. You're seeking out businesses that are exemplar of this. But I want to ask Laura this question too in a minute, but is there stuff out of that 36 that you had to say, ooh, we don't do that, we need a plan? And Jenny, of the businesses in your alliance, I mean, they're hardworking people in low margin businesses. That they aren't, precious pet projects from, benevolent, like second career CEOs that are now they're going to take care of all the things they didn't in their prior career. This is like, I'm going to try to stay profitable and do those 36 things. So it's a new normal. Tell us about the Alliance and tell us, how do I get involved in it?
Sure. The Alliance is by invitation only after a business has gone through the community standards process, which is they are invited once they've gone through these standards. And I just want to say this because I think sometimes the narrative that we use around the community standards, we consider them to be minimum. It sounds like a lot when you say 36, but when you read the 36 standards, when you read it, you'll look at it and say, well, yeah, a business should be doing this. Like, you should be providing your employees the opportunity to vote. You should be you should have a quarry-friendly policy. And we recognize that not every business, especially when business owners start off with just a passion and they build a business from the ground up, we understand that a lot of the policy writing process may not be in place. So we, as Boston Ujima Project, we want to be helpful and thoughtful in the process. So we provide a handbook that's still in the process that gives, hey, this is what it looks like to implement this. So we're not just throwing this and saying you should be this without getting involved, getting in the boat with you. But one of the ways that volunteers can support this work is actually through participation on, we have Ujima Wednesdays. So I am a big cheerleader and a champion for our member teams and our member groups. One of the member teams that specifically supports the Business Alliance is our business support team. So these are volunteers from the community, solidarity members and voting members that join this committee with the mindset that we want to help our businesses win. And that can look like supporting with grassroots strategizing with marketing. So, you know, canvassing out Boston and sharing out the news. It could look like anything because we make space for creative ideas. It can look like supporting by making some phone calls, writing some letters. So there's different ways that we are inviting people into the process of supporting our businesses. But the core for me and for our team is that we approach our businesses with the idea holistically, one, and with the idea that they know about their business and we get to support them, but we don't enter into the space as if we're saving them.
There was a quick question about, just to clarify what Corey friendly is. Can you, without us getting into that panel, which is a different panel, can you just give us in your words, the summary of what does that mean? So folks that don't know that acronym.
I'm trying to find that acronym, actually. 1 second.
It just
Yes.
refers to, go ahead, Laura.
Criminal offender records.
So when I'm coming out of incarceration and returning to my community, or even if I got,
I'll give you let me just throw in a real life example. And Johnny and I were talking about this the other day. This is where the rubber hits the road sometimes for the small businesses. So not only as a Business Alliance member, but before the Business Alliance, CITO was committed at our founding to be Corey friendly. What that means is that whatever is in somebody's criminal records past is not any business of mine as an employer or as somebody building a business and looking for fellow entrepreneurs to build that business with me. However, what happens is we hit up against policies at institutions where we're trying to procure contracts that will say, you must submit to Corey and Sori, and Sori is sexual offenders records. And so what some companies do to hire you or to contract with you as a contractor is to say, you must ensure that no one on your staff, no one involved in this contract has any bad marks on their record. So this is another way that institutional racism plays out, right?
and without getting down the rabbit hole on this one, the Corey system does not just have it on there if you were convicted of a crime in front of a jury, even if you just—
Not about convictions.
It's any time you touch the system in any way, it could have stuff on there. And there are employers who, if there is literally anything at all, it is immediately in the other pile. And they didn't even get a chance to see. It wasn't even me. It was a false identification. No one ever charged me with anything. That stuff that follows people around, it's been addressed in some law reform. There's more to do, but it's one of the 36. There's stuff in the 36 about sustainability, diversity and inclusion, sourcing and suppliers. I want to get at something with you, Jenny. Why is the Business Alliance a thing? Like, so what? Are you okay? So we're holding these up as great businesses, but what do you actually do for them or to them or with them?
So one of the benefits of the Business Alliance is coaching. So credit coaching is part of a greater initiative, but outside of that, we have access to capital as Johnny Charles. That was weird calling you Johnny Charles. As Johnny mentioned, we have the Ujima Business Promotions, where we support businesses in getting sales and promoting them to the greater network.
Love that one. Yes.
Yeah. One thing that
I can be a champion for a business, even if I don't know anything about business. Like if I'm
Exactly.
already thinking like, oh, Seto, I wonder if my synagogue has a composting program. I wonder if my employer has one. I'm now a champion. Am I a fully what do I need to do to qualify to help you make an introduction to somebody on the Business Alliance? Is there a training? Is there like, how do I get on that team?
One way to get involved is, as I shared, business support team, but there's no specific training to be a champion for our businesses. You just have to be willing to share that information, and I act as a bridge for our businesses within our network and Greater Boston network.
Awesome. Hey, by the way, a lot of people are asking, how do I get more information about either with the fund and Johnny, or with the Business Alliance and support team with Jenny? What email can we give out, or what number, or whatever?
The best way is to connect with us in our on our website, because it has a lot of information. But for investing, we have invest@ujimaboston.com. For the Business Alliance, I'm wondering whether I should give my email or the standard.
You don't need to give your personal email, but
we'll do info@ujimaboston.com.
Yeah, it'll get to Jenny, and she'll get
And
you.
I just want to throw out there, we also are pretty active in communicating with folks, with everyone, in terms of like what we're up to, what our latest events are. So signing up for our wires, which are our traditionally updates, newsletters. We have a business wire, we have a staff wire, we have a gender wire, we have an events wire. So to sign up for our wires is one of the best ways to get involved, and just to hear a lot of like what we're up to. And then, and Jenny mentioned our open community meetings on Wednesday evenings. Those are awesome as well too. And so that's a great way to get a taste of how we are and how we practice and how we convene collectively. So just want to throw that out there.
This is great. We only have another 5 minutes, and everybody's got different amounts of time on different nights, so it's so unfair. But I want to close out with stories. Give me some impact, Jenny. Take me to where somebody got involved and made a difference for one of the programs you're working on. Something that gave you a little bit of a lift. Or if Johnny, you've got one on the tip of your tongue, or Laura, if somebody got involved that was helpful. We know it's the exception.
Well,
I was actually going to make space for Laura.
We know the real.
I was too. I was actually, because I think Seto is one of our impact measures and one of our impact stories. I was wondering whether or not if it was appropriate to make space for Seto to say a few words. So
I would love that.
So stories of how people have helped Seto are many, and how people can continue to help us. For example, we are really working on breaking into large institutional procurement contracts. So what we do is we work with institutions, grocery stores, municipalities. If you live in a city or town that is not doing any kind of official composting program, one of the things that you can do is talk to me about how we can set up a drop-off site in your town. And you may save a lot of money in your town budget on trash removal, as well as helping the environment and Seto Co-op by contracting our services for that. Schools and universities, hospitals, senior living residences. Some of the time we get contracts because somebody affiliated with one of these institutions gets in touch and helps us promote the program with their institutional leadership. Right now, we are vying for competitive contracts with Northeastern University, Boston University, Children's Hospital, Partners in Health. If you have relationships with any of those institutions, we would love to talk with you about how you might help us. You know, there's one of the ways that all these societal divides play out is relationships and the Rolodex that you might take for granted, the people that you know that you went to school with, that you might see in your grocery store or in your shul, may have relationships at institutions that influence procurement. But by and large, for us as working class, mostly Black and brown people in Roxbury and Dorchester, we don't tend to have that Rolodex, right? We didn't go to those grad schools. We don't have those relationships. So we're really scratching from the ground up to build those.
Laura,
And
what's the email for people if there's someone asking in their condo?
anybody who wants can email me. I'm Lor, L-O-R, at cero.coop, CERO.COOP. I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah, somebody's talking about their condo development. All of these are great opportunities, and as you can tell, Laura's going to know how to take it from there. So just get in touch. I'm so glad you said relationships. There's a funny thing about this, and a lot of folks on this in this class and session tonight met Deborah Fries last week when we were talking, and there's something really funny about this work, which is that it's going forward to a new place, but a lot of it is going back to relational behavior that is very old school. The difference is we're trying to do it in an inclusive way, because that old charming sort of, person-to-person network was never very inclusive, was it? And the other is that it's trying to embrace self-determination in a way that's authentic, that isn't just, charity. This is not for me to say. I'm just trying to synthesize a little bit. But I think that it's a little bit back to the future, because relational, it's like, Nia, we talk about this a lot. The problem with the old boy network was the boy part, not the fact that people were taking care of their friends and banking based on trust. That's wonderful. It was that they had these like blinders on about who to trust and who to know and who has value. So we're going a little bit back to saying, I don't need a credit check and a criminal history check if I'm in relationship with you, and I understand your goals, and you understand my expectations. That's actually kind of quaint. And yet here we are calling it liberation theology, because our world has gotten so far away from it. That's just my editorial prerogative. Let me give, first of all, the last word to Nia Evans before we hand it back to you, Marilyn. And before I do, I just have to thank and ask for forgiveness from our panel, because we could have heard a lot more from you if we had more time, but we're not done with you. This is a relationship beginning for a lot of us. We honor your work and thank you for your time. Nia, tie it up and synthesize for us. And if there are any questions that have been posted that you want to answer, go ahead and knock them out. And all I want to say about next week is Nia and I will be in touch, because we have to put together our thoughts on what do we need to land this in the right place. So stay tuned, and thank you everybody for participating, and thank you so much, Vilna. But Nia, it's your plane to land. Go for it.
Sure, thank you, Andy. I was not expecting to land a plane, but but I will. And what I wanted to make sure I did do was Lynn asked a question in the chat, and I was actually afraid that I was ruining the Q&A by answering questions in the chat. And so I tried to hold off to wait for Q&A, and then I learned I actually was not. So just really quickly, Lynn just asked about the Boston. So Lynn said, Nia, I'm seeing that you were tagging Boston in the email. Are you interested in growing this in other cities in the US? UjimaSacramento.com. And so just quick answer to that is we want to see this other places for sure. And there are aspects of what Ujima is doing that is considered history making, for example, the fund. And I do, or I should say the democratic governance of the fund. But what I should say is what has been most unique about us has been taking things that people are already doing and saying, we're just going to do all of them, or not all of them, but we're going to do quite a few of them in the same place. And so with that said, we do want to see this ecosystem in other places. We don't feel as if we have to own it. We have gotten calls from all over the country that have asked us about our model. They've asked to pick our brain. And so we are starting a translocal membership program where we will focus on Black communities that want to do Ujima where it is or where they are. And again, it's not our aim to own it. So it may or may not be called Ujima Atlanta, for example, which is one of the cities that has contacted us. But what we will do is we will do our best to support communities in Atlanta who have asked for this to create something where they are. And so we are starting off with Black communities in Atlanta, New York, Albany, New York, Los Angeles, California, and Cleveland, Ohio. So we are excited to see, again, people think about an ecosystem approach that I would just really say democratizes and localizes finance and decision-making in their communities. And then my attempt to land the plane is to say, Andy wanted us to be able to, I would say, kind of leave tonight with a sense of what are the different ways that we can be truly helpful to Ujima. And I think the best way that I can land the plane is to say, we really try our best to provide multiple avenues of participation. And so when I think about attitudes, for example, I think that's what I want to land on. I would say, come with curiosity. So Jenny already talked about listening, and I want to underscore that. And I would say, come with genuine curiosity. And what I mean by that is come not knowing and embrace not knowing, and come excited to learn and to try out the different spaces that we have created and try them out and see what sticks. Because we've tried to create different spaces that account for the diverse lives that we lead. Some of us can show up every Wednesday for Ujima Wednesday, some of us cannot. Some of us can show up for member team meetings, some of us cannot. Some of us can invest in the fund, some of us cannot. Some of us can donate, some of us cannot. Some of us can read every word of our very long emails that we send out, and we will not shorten the emails no matter what anyone says. Some of us cannot. And so really, again, as I said, we really try to create as many opportunities that match the different lives that we need as possible for people to participate. So come wanting to learn more, come with curiosity, come with patience. Time is different at Ujima. We are not in a hurry. We want to do what we do well, because we believe it is more important for us to do good, excellent work on behalf of our communities than to rush and say we did something. And so I will leave it there. Curiosity, listening, patience.
Thank you, Nia. The generosity of this, everyone's volunteering their time to see if we can create some light in a dark time, in a dark season. The holidays that are coming are part of that, all of them, between Hanukkah and Christmas and Kwanzaa, which is about lighting candles to represent meaning. And maybe we'll talk a little bit about that next week, because I think people's knowledge of it is really widely varied, and maybe we can update kind of on some of the nexus between your work and some of the Swahili principles and where that picks up. I don't know if we can find a way to I feel like we can connect any two dots with this process, but maybe we can do that. For the moment, I'm going to just say thank you to everybody for participating and attending. The Vilna community is a curiosity community. So many of you are with different organizations or your own family, and we're just trying to put food on the table so you can eat. Metaphor. Although a lot of those businesses in the Alliance, Jenny, there's some food there, right? Everybody make sure you look at that Business Alliance and see if there's some holiday gifts you can buy off that list, right? Some gift cards and some stocking stuffers or some Hanukkah gifts and maybe some big presents. But let's spend some money in this economy right now. And with that, thank you, Marilyn, it's yours.
I'd just like to thank everybody for your time, and really it's been a wonderful evening, very, very helpful. And I want you to know that as an organization, the Vilna really does want to A, spread the word about what you're doing, B, learn, because we know that there's a lot of things that we don't know. And and just judging by the response that this series has had, and the people reaching out for the resource list, we've been getting emails in addition to the chats. So we know that we're really onto something, and we're proud to take the lead. And one of our values is really responsibility. This is an inflection point really for the world, and not just for our organization. And we want to be able to, Johnny, I like what Johnny said in the beginning about what his son will think about what he did at this time. And I think about that a lot. I even wrote a song for our event in June, like we're 100 years old, our organization. What will our children and grandchildren say 100 years from now about what we did today? And so that's what drives the Vilna, and we look forward to learning more from you. And thank you very much for everybody who's joined us this evening, all our partners, and we look forward to partnering in the future. So thank you, everybody. Have a great night.